Welcome to the Big Me Kickoff. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. It is Friday, February 2024. Show is brought to you in part by our great friends over at KnowNaturals.com. Check out the scroll, check out the show notes to learn more about our amazing partner. I will tell you more about them here in a second. But we are finishing up a week here as we are a week closer to the start of Ohio State spring football. So much going on. We can look forward to 2024's postseason, but don't get too comfortable with what you are hearing for 2024 because it sounds like the powers that be love change. And in loving change, that means that as soon as 2026, we could see a new format. We've already seen the change. Change is inevitable. We saw the College Football Playoff Committee go from a 6+6 system to a 5+7 system. We talked about that earlier this week here on the Big Me Kickoff. So be sure to check us out at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle and find the previous show where we talked about that. I don't necessarily want to get too far into that one, but we do, we do kind of have to build off of shows as news evolves. Hello, McChickens, give me Woody 69. I'm flattered. I don't know if I'm a handsome stud, but I'm here so I don't get fined. Bootzilla saying hello. How are you doing, Bootzilla, as well? Remember, these live shows are your opportunity to program what it is that I talk about, but I did come into the show with some prepared thoughts just to get us started. I did promote the show as of this morning. I did create the show last night, so there should be a little bit more chance for distribution. Wingman Ted saying, what's up? Not a whole lot. Going to go for 30, 45 minutes. We know that means I'll go an hour and a half just because that's when the show will really start to go. But once this is done, I'm going to go grab some lunch. But as we got Ohio Bookseller here as well. How's it going, Ohio Bookseller? Thanks for the emails. I do reach out to Ohio Bookseller via email, but let me read our commercial. Get the housekeeping done with you in the first 3 minutes, which is kind of what I try to do. Are you ready for an entirely different edible experience? Welcome to No Naturals, where we're shattering the stereotypes of one-note, slow-acting gummies. Forget waiting over an hour to feel the effects. Ours are fast-acting in just 15 to 30 minutes. You're not just choosing a flavor, you're choosing your vibe. With 5 core experiences and 6 custom combos, you're in full control. Whether it's energy and focus without the crash, a peaceful slumber that lasts all night, or a game-changing burst of bliss and euphoria, these edibles are the real deal. And the best part, you don't need a doctor's recommendation. No Natural gummies are dispensary quality and discreetly delivered right to your door. So whether you're craving a productivity boost, a good night's sleep, or some blissful euphoria, say hello to No Naturals. Try them today and use code HUDDLE10 for 10% off your order at shop.nonaturals.com. That's a mouthful to say right there. Know your edibles. Know your experience. No Naturals. So there you go. As I've said, I use the product and I am a big fan, and I've highly recommended them to a lot of people, and people that I've recommended them to have come back with very positive feedback as well. So be sure to use code HUDDLE10 at shop.nonaturals.com to get 10% off your order delivered right to your door in discreet packaging, and know your naturals. All right. So Wingman Ted asking, what is for lunch? I don't know. There's part of me that I like the idea of getting Chipotle, and then I go to the local Chipotle and I'm like, why did I get this? I don't think my local Chipotle is good at all. So I need to start training myself not to do it. The problem is the other two that are within 5 miles, 8 miles of the house aren't very good either. So maybe Chipotle is just going downhill. I don't know. So we'll figure it out. I have to record something with Mark Givler on the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast as well today. So I would like to get that knocked out before I go somewhere and maybe have a lunch beer or something like that. So we'll figure that out. Odysseus already talking about going to 14 teams. Crazy. What's next? 28? No, 16 would be next. And let's kind of get into that because, let me jump onto what Doug Shepard said, and then I will get back to Odysseus's question because that is kind of what I pre-prepared. But again, you guys dictate what we talk about on the live shows. So if we go in a different direction, like lunch, then we'll talk about lunch a little bit. But I try to make sure that I can check off all the boxes for everybody. The not getting an alert for the show for Doug Shepard, that is kind of a YouTube thing. I did create the show last night. It should alert you. I do know that the system is far from perfect. It's far from perfect. I think to say of all the shows that I do, the one that is most likely going to happen is going to be the Friday 1 p.m. live show. And I say that by following it up by saying I will not be going live at 1 o'clock this upcoming Friday. I will be in Indianapolis at the NFL Scouting Combine. The schedule will be all out of whack. What I need to do is I have a Big Me Kickoff Twitter account. I should just start putting schedules out on there so people know. Let me work on that. Give me a week or two, and I will come up with a better system to where those of you who use Twitter can kind of follow the show schedule there. Maybe I'll do something where I post it over at Buckeye Huddle as well. If you don't belong to either, why not sign up for Buckeye Huddle? Check everything out there. Great team coverage from Tom, Tony, myself, Mark Giller with the recruiting coverage, and a team of experts to make you a better college football fan and understanding the X's and O's. Doug Shepard says, I get more alerts for recommendations I'm not interested in. Yeah, I wish I had an answer as to the rhyme and reason as to why communication through the YouTube platform is the way that it is, but I don't know. If I understood it better, I would probably be a computer guy and not a sports guy and probably have a lot more money. But I digress. Let me get to the point here because as I said before, I enjoy doing solo shows as much as possible because that way I can kind of roll with my thoughts, but I do get disjointed. And I've had it pointed out to me that I do get a little disjointed. I do kind of, I don't know, get over my skis at times. I don't get back to certain points, things of that nature. So I came in with a plan. That is ultimately the best thing we can do. Come in with a plan. And then if so many questions come in that I don't get to use anything I planned on, at least we had a plan. You buy insurance not to use insurance. At least that's the hope. I'm hoping I don't have to always use everything that I plan out, that we will take off with the numbers. Again, maybe I need to do a week of where I go live 3 times in a week just to build the numbers up. We're in February. People are not really in football mode at this point. I think people will kind of come back to the channel in March once we get into spring football and things of that nature. But all right, I know where we are in the chat, so I will get back to that here in a second. But let's get to the main point as I'm kind of adjusting around here. The College Football Playoff Committee talked about 14 teams for the 26 season, which I guess would be kind of the 26/27 playoffs, like after 2 years of the 12-team playoff. And you could look at this one of a couple of different ways. You could either look at it and say that is it to bring in 2 more teams on the bottom end, or is it in a way to give 2 more first round buys and not necessarily change the amount of games? If you take 2 teams out of the first round and give them buys, and you take 2 teams and you add them into the first round, you haven't necessarily changed anything. You've changed the structure a little bit, but you haven't changed the amount of games that will be played in total. But I also think that 16 teams could be in play as well. And Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti is somebody who seems to be in favor of this. I know that your Power 2 conferences, being the Big Ten and the SEC, want to obviously protect their membership the best that they can, get more automatic bids for the conference. It wouldn't hurt to have a situation of where you have more potential bye weeks for members of your conference in the playoff structure. I'm not exactly sure how you get to that point, but the reality is the Big Ten and the SEC are going to fill the majority of these spots. Again, we talked about this on Monday. So for those of you who watch us daily or 3 times a week, first of all, thank you. And second of all, I'm sorry that I'm kind of repeating myself, but we get a different crowd for most shows. So I do want to kind of have the depth there to talk about that situation. If you on a 12-team playoff with a 5+7 model, 5 spots are locked in, 7 spots are quote unquote at large. The Big Ten and the SEC are each going to get 1 AQ. Their conference champion, the winner of their conference championship game, will be in the playoff regardless. So that's 2 of the spots. So that means you have 3 spots that can't be touched. A spot that's going to likely go to the ACC champion, a spot that's likely going to go to the Big 12 champion, and then a spot that's going to go to whatever the highest ranked group of 5 team is. So then you have 7 more spots left. So if you're a true conspiracy theorist, you could say, well, that means that the high water mark for the Big Ten and the SEC is to take 9 of the spots. Well, that's probably unlikely. But is it far-fetched to say that the Big Ten and the SEC could take 7 of the spots? 7 spots go to the Big Ten and the SEC, 5 spots go to everybody else, meaning that you get your 3 auto spots that are going to go to non-Power 2 teams and then maybe 2 at-large bids while everything else goes there. I think that the Big Ten and the SEC powers that be want to make sure let's take guesswork out of this. Let's lock 6 spots to these teams. We know who the best 2 conferences are. We know who's got the highest, viewership and interest and everything else. Let's cut with the shenanigans and do this. Now, in doing that, maybe you do need to expand the field, because if you sit there and say, we're immediately going to lock 6 of the 12 teams in from the Power 2, if I'm not part of the Power 2, I'm really not liking that situation. You are giving me a very small landing pad to maneuver to in the middle of the Indian Ocean during typhoon season. I'm not really going to be digging that. So maybe at that point, what you do is you expand a little bit more. And then if you say, okay, well, we're going to be guaranteed between the 2 conferences 6 of the spots, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be capped. There's a difference between what you're given and what you're capped at. We're not going to be capped, but we know we're going to get 6 of the spots. So let's take it to 14. Let's take it to 16. And then you do that, because ultimately you're going to get shares of the money based on the amount of teams that you have. So you're going to have these conferences are going to be able to say, we know going in every year, there's not going to be any chicanery going on to where we're going to end up with 2 teams from our conference and not 3 or 4 or whatever. So there's something to be said about that. As these budgets, everybody's got a budget, everybody's got to make the numbers work, everything else. So why did we even agree at 12 in the first place if there were going to be people who didn't like the economics of it? Now, I understand a lot has changed. The Pac-12 has gone belly up. Sorry, Oregon State. Sorry, Washington State. You may still have the pennant, and you still may have the mailing address, and you still may have the mailbox key, but the Pac-12 is dead for now. Your scheduling agreement with the Mountain West does nothing. Nothing for me. Nothing for anybody, to be honest. Probably nothing for the fans of those 2 teams. So things have changed. But I don't think that the demise of the Power 5 to the Power 4 has created this whole new equation. Now, we have seen some changes in terms of who are the commissioners. Kevin Warren out, Tony Petitti in, how that's worked out with, where we stand on how these things are being approached. But does this mean, and I'm going to get to your questions in a minute, I'm going to tap the pause on my comments, and I'm going to get into your comments, and we'll see where the show takes us. It's how have we come to this new watershed moment of where we need to make these decisions? Now, if Florida State is able to sue or buy its way out of the ACC, and that creates another round of expansion and realignment. Any changes that we're making right now, who the hell cares? Who the hell cares about what we're doing? It's everything's going to change anyway. And again, I don't mean to keep going back to the Monday or the Tuesday show, but that's where we are, because this is the topic. We're not really talking about the NFL scouting combine, and we will if you want to, and we will. But this is the kind of the topic that people want to talk about. If Florida State leaves the ACC, just Florida State, who is the ACC going to go and get that's even going to be a reasonable facsimile of a draw outside of Notre Dame? And Notre Dame, we're independent. We'll see. So there's really not anything that you're going to be able to backfill with. We're talking about being in this vacuum where Miami and Clemson and some of these other schools don't say, they got to leave. What about us? So the ACC is not going to be stronger than it is right this second. Right this second is as strong as the ACC is ever going to be, barring a negative ruling in Florida State's case and Notre Dame deciding, you know what, let's just jump into the pool. There's no real upside for Notre Dame to jump into the ACC pool. The ACC is a lessening commodity at this point. It's devaluing. I don't know how that whole situation is going to end up. I do feel pretty strongly in saying that we are probably not that far removed from Florida State leaving. Florida State on its own, I mean, first of all, odd numbers don't work, but Florida State on its own is not going to be able to get into the Big Ten, in my opinion. It is going to need a tremendous dance partner. And it's not a case of that it's like, well, Florida State is, without value. No, it has value, but it has to have a partner with it to where the combined value makes sense financially for the parties that draw their finances off of these, TV deals and everything else. So Florida State is still working its way through this with a couple of other programs keenly watching. Now, if Florida State truly has gone and lined up private equity credit or things of that nature to buy its way out, that doesn't necessarily mean that Miami, even though everyone's going to look to John Ruiz, their big NIL donor at LifeWallet, to cut a check, or Clemson, I guess you're going to look at what, the New Spring Church, Dabo's Church. I don't know. That's not to say that there aren't, high value donors at Clemson. There absolutely are, but I just don't know who they are off the top of my head. I don't really follow that program. If it gets to a situation of where you're buying your way out, whether or not it's the courts say, this is the cost, $120 million. This is what it's, and that's just, I'm making up numbers. $120 million to buy your way out. Florida State may be in a much better position right now just because they're the ones who at least above board are doing all of this work. All this hand wringing, all this, gnashing of teeth and anger and everything else, 63-3, blah, blah, blah. But if the ACC loses a couple of members, while the ACC doesn't necessarily drop into the Pac-12s of the world, a conference with two teams, the ACC is suddenly, devalued. Why are you going to be trying to make changes right now and sign deals to where, okay, well, we've done this, so we're going to do 2 years of 12, and then we're going to do 2 years of 14, and then you're going to have to wait out 4 years, and it just doesn't make sense. But let me kind of get through some of your questions and comments here, because you guys are really the star of the show. You're picking my brain. I'm talking, you're talking. I'm not listening at this point, so we're going to remedy that and get here to some of these things. All right. Odysseus is talking about something else, is talking about Tom needs to do his best Harry Carey impersonation in November. Check out the kid in the sombrero. Yeah, I'm here for it. I was actually talking with a group of writers, and we were saying that the media meal should probably be a Chicago dog and an old style, both being mandatory. That should be the media meal for that game if Ohio State, in fact, does play at Wrigley Field November 13th, something like that. It's like 2 weeks, 2 weeks before Michigan, I believe, is when it is. It's November 16th. I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. I know that I've booked a hotel just in case because where I had booked near Evanston is immaterial at this point. Immaterial. There's no reason to stay out there. Ryan Field, a pile of debris as they're renovating. By renovating, I mean completely gutting and replacing probably the dumpiest stadium in the conference. Let me go here. Let's see. Wingman Ted. We're still in the food conversation, but we're going to get into what I promised you. How close is local cantina to you? $2 happy hour beer, self-service chips and salsa, and cheap apps starting at 3 p.m. plus a full bar based on how this show goes. There is one in Canal Winchester, which is 15-ish minutes away. That is the closest cantina to me. I do like cantina. I wish their salsa had more flavor. It's very bland to me. And I know they've got the add-in sauces or whatever. I like their margs, but their margs are really expensive. But $2 happy hour beers, not the worst thing in the world. My wife is out of town right now, so I have a lot of flexibility. If I decide to have dinner at 3 o'clock, no, I'm not that old. But if I decide I want to have my big meal at 3 o'clock, I'm not going to have to, there's not going to be hell to pay of, I can't believe you ate without me. I can do whatever I want. I haven't had anything to eat yet today. What I'm thinking about doing is probably just making a sandwich. I've got some bagels that are kind of getting to the end of their life cycle. Just toast it up lightly, a little cream cheese, a little ham on there. Just do one sandwich and try and get myself closer to dinner. But I also know that Friday nights can be hectic, and with it being not too terrible outside, I think that you're going to see a lot of people being out. So I better make a decision sooner rather than later. Let me get here to Odysseus. I think 2 more SEC or Big Ten teams. I think more of those teams should qualify. We have not seen a single second of the 12-team playoff. I don't need to see a single second of the 12-team playoff. There is not a question in my mind who the best 2 conferences are in the nation. And that's the Big Ten and the SEC. It's either 1-2 or 2-1 or however you want to have it. And honestly, I think it's premature to really speak on it now because we haven't seen anybody even start spring practice really. But the Big Ten adds 4 teams. The SEC adds 2 teams. We know that Texas is going to be a national championship contender this year. Oklahoma probably a step back. The Big Ten adds the 4 teams. Oregon is certainly very much in the national championship conversation. I think Washington takes a step back. I think UCLA takes several steps back. And I think USC is in the mix, maybe fringe national championship contender. I'm still, until I see real defense played there, and I know, everybody's punching bag of Alex Grinch is gone. I understand that. And I understand that Miller Moss did not look all that bad in the postseason, but you got to remember postseason is postseason, and if you're not playing in the college football playoff, you're just playing an exhibition game. So I'm not going to do a lot of money on who I think that this person is going to win the Heisman. That Miller Moss is going to win the Heisman at this point. I don't know enough about him. I don't even know if he wins the job. I don't know the roster well enough. That's what March is for. March and April, I start to do a bit more of a deep dive on the rest of the conference. The dive is going to have to be really deep on the 4 new teams. But the point being, getting back to what Odysseus 2002 is saying is the Big Ten and the SEC certainly are going to have the inventory to warrant more slots. This is not the Major League Baseball All-Star game where the Colorado Rockies have to have an All-Star, where the Kansas City Royals have to have an All-Star, and everybody's outraged about 3 or 4 snubs in order to have this equity. You are still going to have, though, where, again, 5 conference champions will be part of the field. Only 2 of those, Big Ten, SEC, that's 2. And the way it could work is A power four conference champion in theory could be left out. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I don't see a situation of where 2 or 3 group of 5 champions, the American, the Sun Belt, the MAC, whatever, all have their champions ranked higher than one of the other 2 Power 4 leagues. But mathematically, it could happen. But just because something can happen doesn't mean it will happen. But I think it's important that if the goal is to have the best possible tournament of teams, the best possible grouping of teams, you need to make sure that you have things in place to represent that. Now, the reality is that you can make the argument like, well, if you're the best, you should be able to prove that on the field anyway. You shouldn't need all this other stuff locked in. Okay, Big Ten, prove it. Show us why Ohio State and Penn State and Oregon and whoever, notice who I'm not saying at this point, why they should all be in there. Earn it on the field. Earn it in the rankings. Don't have us have to, build spots for you. But I guarantee you, the number 4 Big Ten team is still going to be pretty darn good. Now, we're also going to be in a world of where one loss does not knock you out of consideration. People are going to have to take much more of an NFL mindset. Miami Dolphins don't drink champagne every year for being the last undefeated team all the way through, just for the hell of it. It is really damn difficult to get through that whole thing, win out all of your games, and then run it through the playoffs. There's a reason. Now, that's not necessarily to say that college football is going to see that level of parity, but even under the best of circumstances, how many undefeated teams are there really at the end of the year? 2, 3, whatever. We've just made the top 2 conferences much more difficult. There are going to be fewer gimmies on the schedule. You are going to be playing the teams that are just happy to be there less often. You're still going to play some of those games. But if you look at a lot of these schedules, and I'm trying like hell not to pick on certain programs because that's not fair. A little fair. I'm trying not to pick on certain programs, but they're just happy to be there. They're just happy to be there. We're here. We get the swag. We get the TV money, but it's going to be more complicated. So, will there be any undefeated teams at the end of 24? I haven't looked to see if that's a prop bet at any of the books, but that would be an interesting bet right there. Will there be any undefeated teams at the end of the regular season? Historically, I would say yes, not many. I would put the over-under at, do I put it at a half? Do I put it at 1.5? Maybe 1.5. That's saying, if you want to take the over, that's 2. That feels like a lot. Maybe the group of 5 conferences, their stuff hasn't necessarily gotten that much more complicated. Especially the conferences that have seen teams leave to jump up elsewhere and have backfilled with teams that have come out of lower classifications. And we're not talking about a lot of D2 and D3 schools or even 1AA teams that are moving up, but you're seeing, okay, these guys are moving up, so they leave holes here, so we got people moving up into those holes. So maybe that we have more of an issue of that there's a group of 5 team, depending on what their non-conference schedule is, who they've scheduled there, that runs the table more so than the Big Ten. We'll just use Ohio State as an example. And I'm not ready to make a prediction on what I think the record's going to be. And don't take anything I say here as, oh my God, Noon is picking a loss or 2 losses. No, we're just talking. We're just talking. Ohio State was not normally going to play Oregon as a conference game. Yes, in 2020, Ohio State was supposed to play Oregon. But Ohio State's schedule has changed to the point of where Ohio State, yes, was in the Big Ten East. Yes, there were certain teams on that schedule for being a Big Ten East team that were probably a little bit easier to predict the outcome of than before. You do away with divisions. The Big Ten West runs into a big dose of reality, no longer getting to play on the middling wheel of the Big Ten West, spin the wheel. Nobody knows where it's going to stop. Nobody knows who's going to win at any given week. Nobody knows if any points are going to be scored. That Big Ten West. You take some of those games out and you add, and nobody's having to play all four of the West Coast teams at once. I think somebody's getting three of them. Ohio State's getting one of them this year, but you're taking out some of these easier games and potentially drawing Oregon or USC or Washington. And you're kind of happy if you're drawing UCLA. But then again, you don't know what you don't know. And UCLA, say what you will of not necessarily having a great season and now having a new head coach and everything else. UCLA can fix itself a lot quicker than Iowa can. UCLA can fix itself a lot quicker than Illinois can. And here's why. UCLA just needs to keep a couple of kids home. Illinois, University of Illinois is in Champaign-Urbana, which is central south part of the state. There are two states of Illinois. There's Illinois and there's Chicagoland. Whether or not you want to say Chicagoland is 4 counties, 6 counties, whatever. If you want to take it all the way out to Kane County, which I think is a little too far, I think you leave Kane County off of it, which is where St. Charles is. Just because you are University of Illinois doesn't mean that you're going to be able to recruit Chicago well. Illinois has not been able to recruit Chicago well. I don't think Illinois has recruited Chicago well since Ron Zook was the head coach, at least with any regularity. I know we're really deep diving into some stuff, but I think, again, this is important in terms of me not rambling off into tangents and whatnot. But it's a lot more difficult, in my opinion, for Illinois to bolster its roster with rising high school kids than it is for UCLA. And yes, UCLA is going to have to play several football games a year east of the Rockies. That's a reality. Big Ten networks out there. You're still going to be able to get to see, all the home games. A couple, maybe you're going USC or UCLA is going to play USC every year. That's a protected rival. There are a lot of things there. So you're going to be able to still recruit your area and be able to recruit beyond. If you're a high school kid that is pretty wide open, maybe Ohio State and the team up north and a couple other schools are not a reasonable option for you. But you can go to the vast majority of schools. Are you going to go to UCLA, Southern California, sunshine, everything else? Okay, smog, traffic, expensive, whatever. Or are you going to go to Champaign-Urbana? I mean, if you have no geographical ties, I'll tell you where I think I would go. Hell, I was going to go to Pepperdine. I was accepted to Pepperdine. I know you've all heard the story. Yes, Kevin, we know you were going to go to Pepperdine. Why don't you just go there? Okay. If I could move to Malibu right now, I would. I'd still do my show. I just do it from Malibu. So I think that when it comes to the expansion, I've gone round and round about it. I don't prove it on the field. Let me see a year or two. And I know you have to operate a couple of years in advance due to the way these contracts are and everything else. And you just can't act unilaterally and so on and so forth. But for all things holy, we haven't even played a single season of the 12-team playoff. And again, I understand you have some different people sitting around the table, some things have changed, yada yada. Let me get to your questions again. Wingman Ted, 12 seemed extreme to me in the first place. They talk about added revenue and more of a fair chance, but the only plus here is maybe less opt-outs, making the first round games a watchable product. And here's part two. And maybe 5-6 teams winning it all. There's just such a gap between 1 and 10 ranked teams already. Why water down the new playoff before we've even seen it? I think that I don't think that the 10 line is, I think it's higher than that. I think that there is the gap really is around 7. I think the gap is really around 7. There are not a lot of years once you get into November that you're like, there are 10 teams that really could win the national championship. And there are exceptions. There are exceptions. And I'm the first to admit that. But generally, there's like 1 and 2 are significantly better than everybody else, or 1, 2, and 3 are significantly better than else. There were a lot of years of the 4-team playoff that it was really 3, and then the fourth team was kind of just there. And people would be like, don't forget, Ohio State won the national championship as the 4 seed. Yes. And that's a story that we're going to be telling our kids and our grandkids about and everything else. And just because most years it's only 3 teams deep doesn't mean that I'm saying every year, just a lot of years. So if you sit there and let's just say, for argument's sake, that's the real cut is after 6, and then you have either 7 through 12 or 7 through 14 or 7 through 16 playing each other. Maybe a team gets hot. They play a first round game. They find something. They're clicking. Upsets do happen. Probably less likely in the postseason. It's different playing then than playing in September, and you don't know who you are yet, and all of that stuff. But you would at least be solidifying more of your first round product, because remember, your top 4 teams or your top 6 teams, however the math works out in this new deal, won't play that first round, whatever that is, December 14th or whatever. I don't have it in front of me at the moment. I didn't think about that. So for junkies like many of us, we're going to watch any game. You're just going to put it in front of them. Okay, I'll watch it. I get that. But if you can sit there and have maybe some more intriguing games, maybe some more, and I'm not saying to cook the books to make some of these things happen, but let's just say, for argument's sake, that Washington and, by doing this, you have like Washington and Tennessee playing each other in Seattle in December. And granted, Seattle's not, I'm not saying they're going to be playing out in Wenatchee or anything like that. They'd be playing in Seattle. So you're not looking at necessarily the worst weather in the world. I would be more inclined to watch that. So I don't know. They don't even have their rights deal down for the 12-team playoff. So I guess this is the time to act. We don't know what the hell it is we're doing for the 12-team playoff. May as well have that as part of the television deal. If you get in and you buy into this, whatever, 8-year contract, 10-year contract, whatever the hell it is, you know what's going to happen here. You're going to have a better chance of having another game that is probably going to be more competitive and less crummy than what it could be. So I don't know. Let me see here. Odysseus, FSU getting out will have a domino effect, leading the ACC going the way of the Pac-12. I agree. I think the ACC is going to hang on for dear life. I think you just have a lot of teams in the ACC that are not super desirable. they're not going to be worth a full share or a half share. They may be worth a quarter share of some of these deals. And nobody wants to discount themselves. Nobody wants to say, this is a worthless piece of crap. I'll take a quarter deal. Then again, I guess compared to the alternative of having a quarter of a grape is more than, nothing of nothing. So I guess you kind of look there, but follow this Florida State story. It's there's not daily news on it. There's not daily news on it. So there's not a case of where it's like going to be a job to keep track of what's happening there. But I think that you're going to get a good window into what the future of college football is going to be, because it's an untenable situation for the ACC if Florida State leaves. If Florida State leaves and takes others with it, it's catastrophic to the ACC. People are not going to get that excited about Wake Boston College, are not going to get that excited about NC State, Virginia. They're just not. There was a day and age for me that I would watch those games on Jefferson Pilot or whatever and be like, well, football, bad football is better than no football. 30 years older now. I'm busy. I got stuff to do. I worked in television at the time. When I was done working, I came home and I wasn't going to get a call generally that was going to be like, so-and-so just committed. We need you to write a story and do a podcast and everything else. I like my downtime a little bit more. And there are times that I find myself sitting in my living room with the TV off more now than I ever have in my life. So I'm becoming that guy. I guess before you know it, I'll be eating 4:00 dinners and going to bed at 8. I won't be waking up early. That has never been my method, though. Frank Carone asking, will Notre Dame get into the Big Ten? Does Notre Dame want to get into the Big Ten? The answer's been no so far. I mean, yeah, there was one time where the Big Ten was like, that was years and years and years ago. Remember, there is a change in leadership in the athletic department at Notre Dame taking place in the next couple months. Jack Swarbrick is out. They're bringing in a former NBC sports exec. I don't know the name. It hasn't necessarily been important to me to learn the name. There may be a day and age that changes, but a day and age is not today. Notre Dame would need to find a dance partner. I don't think the Big Ten would really struggle to find a dance partner to come over. Granted, as long as we're operating under the ACC grant of rights, having some teeth, which Florida State disputes, I don't know who that dance partner would be. There isn't necessarily anybody in the Big 12 that makes sense. People might say, well, Kansas. I'm not that excited about that. It's all great for Kansas that Lance Leipold has really turned that program around. It's the best that they have looked in football with a little consistency since the days of Glenn Mason. Probably better than even when Glenn Mason was there. But I don't really see a whole lot there. And of course, we've all talked about through the years that TV markets. We're not in that round of expansion anymore. We're not in the TV markets expansion. USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon were not brought over just because of the LA market, the Seattle market, and the Portland market. Rutgers got in because of the New York market. Maryland got in because of the DC market. I am a firm believer in addition by subtraction. I think that if you are really trying to consolidate your power base, you need to weaken your competition. The Big Ten isn't going to be able to weaken the SEC. The SEC is not going to be able to weaken the Big Ten. Now, somebody's going to be like, well, the SEC has been weakening the Big Ten all along in the postseason. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about these conferences aren't going to raid each other and take member institutions. So if you are able to destabilize the ACC, and this isn't a personal thing. This isn't like, well, take that, ACC. But if you're able to make the ACC less valuable, if you're able to make the ACC less attractive, if you're able to make the ACC less relevant, Why wouldn't you do it if you can make the numbers work? You're all competing for a finite amount of dollars. Now, I don't think it's a case of where NBC and Fox and CBS and ESPN all have sat there and looked and it's like, I have exactly this amount of dollars to spend on my rights deals. But the reality is that you're not really going to go out there and create more dollars per se. It's more of a zero sum game. And if you destabilize this conference, you can take some of the money out of that bucket and put it in this bucket. Now, there are some escalators in there to where if you let's use a round number for the hell of it, take $100 million out of the ACC and you put it in the Big Ten or the SEC, that $100 million suddenly becomes worth 150 million because of this, that, and the other. So there were some hidden dollars there. And I'm not an economist. I took Econ 200 when I was at Ohio State and purposefully dated a girl who was really good in econ to get through that class because I did not like it. Just not how I'm wired. But with that being said, if you can weaken the ACC and then it becomes a power three, and more so than that, I think if you do that, then the third team of the power three, being the Big 12, gets weakened by association because I think the chasm between the top two and everybody else gets even wider. The ACC and the Big 12 strengthen each other with their very existence because they have somebody who is a true peer in prestige of a lot of the schools and everything else, and maybe even to the point of some dollar figures. If you take that out, then you're standing alone, and then it looks a lot worse. Now, of course, we have had when Oregon and Washington were kind of sitting out there dangling. Everybody's like, well, the Big Ten's like, we don't want to be the conference with blood on our hands that ends the Pac-12. You already were. When you took USC and UCLA, that was that. You took the most marketable brands out of that conference. You can tell yourself you aren't a killer, but the record is going to show otherwise. And I don't know if I want my sports to be that predatory, but then again, I think I do. Anybody who loves floating the idea of modeling college football or pro football or whatever, like European soccer with relegation, we're talking about predatory sports. There are parts of that are interesting. I'm not going to get too much into relegation and why it won't work, other than the fact of you're building budgets out for years and years and years and years. And I think if you get relegated, you're never coming back. If you got relegated, you are never, ever, ever coming back. Even if you had a setup to where getting, relegated out, you're not getting relegated to 1AA, to FCS, and having to go from 85 scholarships to whatever it is, 53 or 60 or whatever it may be. It is just too big of a mountain to climb. If you got relegated, watch your fan base say, I'm out. You're just, the dollars evaporate. And if you can't stay competitive on the field and then you can't stay competitive off the field, you're done. But again, to my point, as I have done much more of my own talking, maybe they should have been a tape show because I had a lot to say today. Apparently, I was afraid I was going to make it to 30 minutes, to be quite honest. Weakening your opponents, if the Big Ten and the SEC are entertaining the idea of having their own thing, you're going to have to be a predator anyway. Because I don't think that everybody that was born into the Big Ten and the SEC is prepared to make the same commitment that the haves are. And again, not to name schools, but there are schools in both conferences that are just not going to win the national championship. Period. In football, they're just not. There's not enough rabbit's feet, and lucky horseshoes, and whatever else, four-leaf clovers to get you there. So you're going to have a point, I think, of where you're going to have a complete explosion of where you're trying to figure out what's going on. And you do have a couple teams in the ACC that should be in the conversation for this. You have a couple teams, I think, in the Big 12. I think it's important to have some west of the Rocky representation beyond just the 4 Big 10 teams in the mix. So, we'll see. Let me kind of scroll here. Mika Hanna was late. Again, I'm 30 minutes behind on these comments, so I apologize right there. How's it going, Mika? I have a recommendation to go to Hooters. We do not have any Hooters wing restaurants in Columbus any longer. I believe there were 3, but those have been gone 10 years? 10 years now? Something like that. There was one here on the east side, either off of like 270 in Main or 270 in Broad. I don't remember. It's been long gone. Long gone. There is a Block's Bagels over there that I do like to go to from time to time. Maybe a tuna salad bagel sounds pretty good, but I don't really feel like driving all that way. Let me keep going in here. More comments about Hooters. $5 buckets, of course. Happy hour, yeah. I don't have one. I don't know how I'd have to go, how far I'd have to go. Troy V talking about Kane County. The reason I talked about Kane County is my parents lived outside of St. Charles for a couple of years. I had an aunt and uncle that lived in St. Charles for years and years and years and years. I actually almost did an internship with the Kane County Cougars when they were still part of what minor league baseball used to be. I believe they were an Orioles affiliate at that point. Disappointed that the internship did not happen. Everything happens for a reason. Who knows? Maybe I would still be running around wearing a mascot's outfit if I would have done that, or I could be a GM of a baseball team. Probably nowhere in between that. I'm either the mascot, I'm selling peanuts, or I'm running an entire team. Probably one of the first two, for being honest. Let me keep going here. Odysseus, Notre Dame can join the Patriot League and play Georgetown and Fordham. I have said time and time again, this is how I handle. If I am Big Ten commissioner or deputy commissioner and Tony Petitti puts me in charge of this and says, get them or don't get them, but let's do that. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, this is our last final offer. And if Notre Dame says no thanks, we're done. Big Ten edict. You are no longer allowed to schedule Notre Dame in football. Punishable by flogging. I don't know. You cannot let Notre Dame have its cake and eat it too. If you are serious about bringing Notre Dame into the conference, there has to be real talk, real consequences if they don't come in. And you explain to them, this is not like some boxing retirement to where we're going to revisit this again in another year when the next payday is there. You're in or you're out. And that's how you do it. And that's how you do it. Everybody's so concerned that Notre Dame would go to the SEC. Let them. Who cares? If they go to the SEC, that's fine. If they go to a conference where they are not necessarily a great culture fit in terms of what Notre Dame believes it is compared to what it probably believes that the SEC programs are. And I'm just speaking from a Notre Dame lens more so than what my view is or whatever. If you want to go and do that, fine. If you want to sit there and have a situation where your closest opponents in conference are in Nashville, Tennessee, and Columbia, Missouri, fine. Do it. Don't threaten me with a good time. It would be It would be a tremendous boondoggle, in my opinion. But if the Big Ten says poop or get off the pot, and they get off the pot, they're of no consequence to me. They're of no consequence to me, and they should be of no consequence to you. If that is the situation, and I have lots of people who come up to me like they've had their opportunity. I'm done with them. That's fine. That is a valid argument. That is a valid opinion. There are times where people will say things to me. I'm like, okay, well, we all have opinions, and that's one. But it's a valid one to say Notre Dame has had its shot. I really enjoyed going to Notre Dame, even though I said some awful things apparently about not knowing who anybody on the roster was and caught some crap in South Bend. I had a really good time on that trip. Really did. I wouldn't mind seeing it on the conference schedule. But as college football is in this absolute state of change, if Notre Dame doesn't want to play by the Big Ten's rules, then the Big Ten just has to say, see ya. The Big Ten could go to 10 conference games for all I care and play amongst its own teams more and not miss a beat. Is Purdue going to lose out because it no longer has a Notre Dame game on the schedule, or Michigan State? I mean, I think USC might fight kicking and screaming just because that has always historically been one of its games. But USC might also come to the realization, might replace that with will come to a realization that this Big Ten schedule is going to be a beast. And that may not necessarily be something that it wants to have on a yearly basis. And I know Ohio State has Texas and Georgia and Alabama and some of these schools on its non-conference schedule moving forward. Wake me when these games are played. And that's not me saying that I don't believe some of them aren't going to be played, but I don't think all of them are going to be played. A lot of these contracts were signed before the 12-team playoff. A lot of these contracts, as in all of these contracts, were signed before conference expansion. So we'll see. We'll see. Some Jordan Kapler talking about thumbs, fat thumbs, but let me say, speaking of thumbs, hit the thumbs up while you're at this. Be sure to like the channel, subscribe to the channel if you're watching us on youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. If you're listening to us on one of your favorite podcasting platforms, leave us a 5-star review. All of these help us with distribution to Buckeye fans, much like yourself. Maybe not as great as you, because you've already found us, but so many great Buckeye fans out there who have not found us here on the Big Me Kickoff here at Buckeye Huddle. So all of that can help. So I'm gonna hold out for a second and give you an opportunity to hit that super chat button, or hit the super chat button if you'd like to as well. But to hit that thumbs up, be sure to give us that like. That helps us so much, and subscribe to the channel. 3, 2, 1. Thank you for hitting the button right there. Super chats always get to the top of the conversation. This is a pretty casual show. It's fine. We will get rocking and rolling once we get into March. When it comes to the to spring football, March 5th is when it starts. 2 practices that first week, the 5th and the 7th. My expectations are we will be there in one way, shape, or form for both of those before Ohio State spring break kicks in, and then we go and sprint through the rest of it. Where am I going to be next week? I'm going to be in Indianapolis for the NFL Scouting Combine. Not as many Buckeyes there as you would expect going into last season, but that is what happens when everybody decides to return to the team to run it back. Let me kind of go through the comments again. Wingman Ted, USC will have more bruises than ever after a Big Ten schedule. Look how rough they get beaten down by Utah. Well, I mean, I think it is going to be challenging for them. I think they're going to have to kind of reassess how they handle scheduling. And I'm not necessarily saying I think that the Big Ten immediately needs to go to 10 league games. Hell, we're just finally getting to a point where the SEC is getting serious about going to 9 league games. There's no reason for the Big Ten to try and go over and above and one-up them. I don't think that the committee is going to be like, wow. You're really trying to make things more difficult on yourself. Why, sure, we're going to give you more of a benefit of the doubt. This is not how it works. But getting the two conferences aligned, I think, is a big thing. And then I think that you do go to 10. I do think you go to 10. I think that having 5 home and 5 road makes a lot of sense. And then you play two, you play your two non-conference games. And now, of course, there are going to be the people who are going to be like, let's just use Georgia, for example. Well, we got to play Georgia Tech. And obviously, you're not going to be able to play all of those games in Athens. So it's going to be a home game on odd years and an even a road game on even years or whatever. Well, I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. But if the goal is to get as many good football games there, the goal should be to get the dollar figures to the point of where you can feed all the mouths that you have to feed. And I think that when you're trying to get $100 million a year per institution on the media rights deals, people are going to be much more excited about seeing an additional Big Ten game and an additional Ohio State Washington versus whether or not it's just the bye game and the out of conference Ohio State Akron, or even some of these other situations. I don't know. I don't want to get to a point of where we don't get Ohio State, Alabama during the season or whatever. We don't get LSU and USC or whatnot. I think that would be a major loss for the viewer and for the sport to get there. But I also think we are still very much on the path of this becoming the big two and everybody else can, do whatever. And whether or not at that point you say, okay, you're only going to play within the big two. This is called the NFC and AFC situation of where you have the NFC and the AFC. Well, you have a situation of where I think that you have to play the vast majority of the games in your conference, the NFC and the AFC, the Big Ten and the SEC. I think having some crossover with the other one is fine too. So I don't know. I certainly haven't worked everything out of how I would do it. I mean, I have ideas of what I would like college football to look like. I would like to see the two conferences kind of separate. Let's take it to 95 scholarships, 90, whatever, 90, 95. Let's, have universities directly paying their student athletes. Let's have a situation of where there is a league minimum that everybody gets X amount and so on and so forth. And I think that maybe what you do is you expand your roster from 85 scholarships a little bit higher, and that allows you not to have as much of a division of scholarship versus walk-on and everything else. But you do these things, you have in-helmet communications, you have some of these other situations. That's where we're going. And we can talk about tradition until we are blue in the face. Moving away from the bowl system pre-College Football Alliance, pre-BCS and everything, you've already broken tradition. Granted, you could also say tradition in the Big Ten is only sending one team to a bowl game, which was the case until the mid-'70s. I mean, let's not get ridiculous here. But tradition has already kind of been broken. You can either sit there and break the wheel and fix it and make it right before you run off the road, or you can make small patches along the way and expose yourself to a catastrophic failure and a point of where you can't fix it. NIL could have been addressed years ago. It wasn't. Then what happens? State governments get involved, and there are a bunch of uneven rules, and nobody has their arms around this. And there are a group of people who think that Congress, in its infinite wisdom, can solve this. Keep Congress out of sports, plain and simple. I don't even like it when it's you sit there and you see somebody go up there and try and put into the minutes their support of a team. I don't fix the damn country. Don't fix sports. So I think that you need to sit there and let's use Northwestern and Ryan Field as an example. You know you need to tear down your stadium and rebuild it to be competitive. Have a plan. Have a plan. Don't be scrambling 7 months in advance trying to figure out where the hell you're going to play your games. And it may not be as bad as I'm making it sound. They may have always had a plan and just stuff isn't out there yet or whatever. I'm a little bit more skeptical of that, a little more doubtful of that. But have a plan. Sit there and put a line in the sand and say, by 2028, we are going to have a model of college football that is going to work, that is going to make sense for the next 20 years. That doesn't mean that it's going to be without change. It doesn't mean that membership can't change and everything else. But fix it. Fix it. Don't do it in small pieces. Because so often when you fix things in small pieces, you fix one thing and you break two others. And then you go to fix those two things and you break four others. And he told two friends and he told two friends and so on and so on and so on. To go back to the old shampoo commercial. Fix the damn thing. It's better if you address it than somebody comes in and addresses it for you. Let's go through the last ones as we are getting here to the end of the show. We're at an hour and 6 minutes. I want to thank everybody for joining me here on a Friday. Kickoff 22, top four in Big Ten and SEC should be auto qualifiers. Finishing fourth is probably better than finishing second and maybe first elsewhere. I don't necessarily disagree. My point is, we don't know what the selection process for a 12-team playoff is going to look like in the first place, and we're already trying to rectify it. If finishing fourth in the SEC is better than finishing second in the ACC, shouldn't that be determined on the field and in the polls? It's just an odd look before things even change. We have our brand new fix, this 12-team playoff. Let's change the 12-team playoff. I mean, you haven't even done it yet. I don't know. I don't like it. Wingman Ted says top three. Again, top four. If you sit there and you do top four, that's 8 spots locked up. You have to go at least to 16. I think you have to go to 16 at that point. You can't do 8 locked in for 14. Yes, with my 7 and 5 model, I'm not really giving everybody else more spots, but appearances do mean something. And there's going to be somebody who's going to pull the antitrust card. I'm not a lawyer, nor do I play one on TV, and you've heard it before. I like journalism law so much, I had to take it twice because I hated it so much the first time I stopped going. Damn the consequences. The second time I took, I got a B+ because I actually paid attention. Tookie G says that the AP era was peak college football. I don't have a problem with split champions. I think having split champions, but having something in place to where you have the ability to have those champions play each other would be pretty cool. But I don't think you do that to the point of saying that you have to have split champions in order to necessitate that game, because we all want more football. We don't want less football. If Ohio State wins it all in 24-25 and is a unanimous champion, then you lose the unification belt. You lose that bout right there. So I don't know if I like that. For wrestling fans, your Raw champion and your SmackDown champion and whatever the hell they call them at this point. I may watch a pay-per-view now or then, but that's about as far as I can get into wrestling these days. Just not patient enough. Well, I think we're about caught up. Again, did not plan on going this long. I will be in Indianapolis this upcoming week for the Combine. We will record at least 2 shows. I may record all 3. I may do a live show. I don't know. Keep it locked in. Be sure you hit that subscribe button. I know we talked about it earlier in the show. Your notifications don't always work. Maybe you should be a member at BuckeyeHuddle.com, and I will do a better job of letting you know when I'm going to do shows. And then that way you don't miss a single episode. Plus, you can follow me at Twitter at Kevin_Noon. That is my Twitter account at Kevin_Noon on Twitter. There we go. That is where I am on Twitter. But generally, the first place that I'm going to make these announcements are on BuckeyeHuddle.com. That is how I make a living. All of this takes money. So come on board to BuckeyeHuddle.com. Let me see the last couple comments before we get there. Odysseus thanking us. Thank you for being part of the show, Odysseus. And Tookie G, we are where we are because of trying to have a true national champion. It was a mistake. Well, all right. This sounds like a conversation I want to carry over to another show, and I apologize because that does not seem fair in some regards. Thanks for bringing up this good question, but I'm out of here. But I do have to record something with Mark here later today, and I want to make sure I have a voice left over to record. Be sure to check out everything he has on our Skull Session Recruiting Podcast. We just recently put up our top 5 targets on the offensive side of the ball for the class of 2025. I'm going to give you one guess what it is that we're going to try and record today. I think having a true champion is important. I think it is important. I mean, I don't necessarily like the hypotheticals of, yeah, but what would have happened if Team Up North and whoever would have played in 97 or whatever the half championship year was. I like having a true champion. I didn't like where the BCS went to at the end. We took all the juice out of the BCS. Well, we can't have any hurt feelings, so let's take game control and margin of victory and all of that out of there. Style points. Call it what it is. Let's take style points out of it. Not all losses are the same. Let's take losses out of the equation. You used to get hit with a major penalty with a loss. You had point thrown on you or something like that, which ultimately was very difficult to overcome. So it became this mamby-pamby, watered-down formula that didn't work. And I understand Tookie G is not talking about that. He's talking about a couple of eras before that. I think where my disagreement comes in is that you still need to have a true national champion. I'm okay, with having the split between 2, that's fine. I think you can go through the record books and find years where they're like 16 champions, but then again, the Tallahassee Touchdown Club awarding 7-5 Florida State a national championship that year doesn't mean anything. I know the difference between the major champions, whether it be the AP or the coaches poll or however the BCS, however you want to do that is different than whatever. But having a true you have a true champion in Major League Baseball, you have a true champion in NCAA basketball, you have a true champion in all of these other sports. You don't have a group of champions and you're just like, well, we're fine. And I understand football is different. College football is different, and college football came up very differently. I don't know what the hell the dog's doing down there. So I don't know. I'm getting off into a tangent. As I said, I was going to try and end the show 5, 6, 7 minutes ago. Chris, and I enjoy that you watch us over on Facebook. Be sure to join us as well at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle and at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We will continue to put our shows up on Facebook because I know we do reach a different audience there as well. But most people do come in through the YouTube at that point. Tookie G jumping in. Last one, I promise. And let's connect on a show here soon to where we can continue the conversation. Why does college football need a national champion? College football should be your season and a bowl if you win 9 games. You play to win the game. Why should there be a champion? Why shouldn't there? That just, you know what that sounds like? That sounds like communism to me. Better dead than red. Why do we have to have a lot of teams that all feel great about themselves because they won 9 games and maybe won their bowl game, and we don't have a hierarchy? We as a species, we as a society, a world society, want to rank things. We want to know what is best. We want to know what is worst. We want to know what is in between. Having a group, just a group, a collective, if you will, of teams that just were like, well, they all had good seasons and they all get smiley face stickers like in kindergarten. You have to have a champion. You have to have a champion. Why go through this if not? Again, I guess for me, it's because I have a job covering this. And if we don't have this at all, I'm quickly going to have to figure out something else to do. I guess I could do shows about video games and things like that, but I think I'm getting a late start and probably wouldn't do well there. Got to have a champion. You got to have a champion. I'm going to give Tookie G another minute to see if I get a response, because this is kind of like a congressional hearing. I brought Tookie G up, so Tookie G should have an opportunity to respond back to me. Don't make stuff personal, whatever. I just vehemently disagree. I just vehemently disagree because it defeats the purpose. It defeats the purpose of doing this. Why do you need a national champion? Why not? Why not? I mean, how do you measure yourself against other golfers? By height? I mean, seriously, I don't know. I mean, but I welcome the discussion. I welcome the conversation. I think that that's what makes things a little bit different when we do the live shows versus when we do the recorded shows. I mean, the recorded shows, I go in and I have an idea or 2 ideas and I kind of stick to it and hope that I stay on track and that the train doesn't go over the edge into the ravine or whatever. On the live show, you guys keep me on my toes. But it seems like a whole lot of farting around not to have a champion. And Tookie G here. It never had one before. Adding a natty has ruined the spirit of the game. I disagree. I disagree. You've always had a champion to a certain extent because the AP or the UPI or whoever was going to award a champion. And in doing so, if you take that away, first of all, you can't take it away. That genie's out of her bottle. That bell has already been rung. You're not going to be able to take back either. If you step back from it, you just look like a bunch of wusses at that point by doing it. So you just can't do that. The spirit of the game, I don't know what the hell that is. I don't know what the hell the spirit of the game is. You know what the purpose of the game is? To win. The purpose of the game is to win. The purpose of the season is to win your games and be a champion. And to be a champion. So, again, it just seems like communist football to me. It seems like the South Park episode we were playing Sarcastaball. And if you're unfamiliar with that one, I highly recommend looking up on your favorite search engine the Sarcastaball episode of South Park. And again, I'm totally fine in this conversation that Tookie G and I are having. This is just a debate. This isn't ill will and bad feelings and everything else where most of everything resides. Go on X, go on Insta, go on whatever, and everybody's got to fight with everybody else. I guess maybe running message boards for as long as I have in my career, I've learned that even if I truly disagree with somebody, and I truly disagree with Tookie here. I truly disagree with Tookie, but I don't have an issue with Tookie. So, but what the hell is the spirit of the game? It isn't amateur football in the first place. Not anymore. Not with NIL. Not with cost of attendance. Not with any of this other stuff. This isn't a bunch of people getting into playing a game in the 1800s in Piscataway, New Jersey, the birthplace of college football or whatever. This isn't college football before any rules were really in place and people were dying playing it. and that there was conversation on a national level about banning the sport, I don't know what the spirit of the game is. It is an athletic competition, and competition has winners and losers. And ultimately, the winner of winners is the champion. You need to have a champion. If not, the fabric of this universe is going to be ripped apart, and we're all going to be floating around in a void with no damn champions. And I can't have that. And I won't have that. All right, now I got to catch up with what I've got because I cannot shut up. David Greenshield, college football was extremely popular pre-BCS and playoff. I think it would be fine if we didn't have it. College football pre-BCS and playoff also was not garnering not every game was on television, was not garnering the money that it is for rights fees and everything else. It is what it is. It is what it is. We are where we are. The bell has been rung. Let me continue here. No participation trophies. Now the dog is barking. So now I'm really ready to be done with the show. And last thing, Odysseus, NIL and portal have done more to hurt the spirit of college football. There is no spirit of college football. There's no spirit. I mean, it exists to the same level as Casper the Friendly Ghost exists. Hold on. Yelling at the dog never works, but it makes me feel better. Tookie G, love you, Kevin, but the game was better before, and it's not communism to keep the sport regional and focused on school pride and besting the guy across the street. The bell is rung. The bell is rung. That is gone. They just created the UFL, putting the XFL and the USFL together. They're not playing regional or whatever. You need to have a champion. We're picking winners and losers. There has to be a good guy. There has to be a bad guy. It's black. It's white. The light's on. The light's off. Cloud goes up. Cloud goes down. Whatever. What have you. This is a binary situation. This is not some rainbow of whatever. If you ain't first, you're last. If you ain't first, you're last. Steve Myers saying, just got here, Kevin. Can you recap? No, but you can catch us on the replay. What we are talking about right now, as we've gone into triple overtime here on the Big Me Kickoff, is does college football really even need a national champion? Has trying to crown a true champion hurt the sport? Has it hurt the spirit of the game? I ask the question, what the hell is the spirit of the game? Is that like the spirit of Christmas present? I don't know. And the reality is that we've already come too far. We've already come too far. We all have fond memories of what football may have looked like in the 80s and whatever. And let me be the one to tell you that I don't have a lot of fond Ohio State memories with some of the middling teams that they had in some of those years or whatever. Certainly didn't have fond memories of trying to figure out how to watch games when I didn't live in Columbus before every game was on TV. But all of that costs money, and that money is the fuel that gets thrown into the furnace that keeps the train moving, is my opinion. Tookie, and money is not helpful overall to the sport. Money makes a handful of people rich, which is fine, but I don't have to like money corrupting my favorite sport. Communist. You communist. I knew it. I knew it. Che Guevara. Now, all joking aside, money is money, and it's where we are now. Woody Hayes made diddly squat as Ohio State's head coach and gave a lot of the money away to former players and stuff like that. Former players and whatever. Money is everything in this environment that we live in. Could things be different in 50 years? Yeah. I don't plan to live to be 102 years old, so I don't know what 50 years from now is going to look like. But where we are right now is you can't even watch Ohio State basketball without having Peacock. Don't know how many people are watching Ohio State basketball right now, but games are there. Games are on all sorts of different platforms and everything else. That's money. That's, that whole thing is there in order to put more money into the value of the television deal. So I just don't know. I don't know. Wingman Ted. Kevin, where should I get gummies for a friend of mine before you go to lunch? Well, bonus read, bonus read. Check out No Naturals. Got them here in the scroll. Got them in the show notes. One more commercial because I like them. I like the crew over there, and I like the product. Are you ready for an entirely different edible experience? Welcome to No Naturals, where we're shattering the stereotypes of one-note, slow-acting gummies. Forget waiting over an hour to feel the effects. Our gummies are fast. They act in just 15 to 30 minutes. You're not just choosing a flavor, you're choosing your vibe. With 5 core experiences and 6 custom combos, you're in full control. Whether it's energy and focus without the crash, a peaceful slumber that lasts all night, or a game-changing burst of bliss and euphoria, these edibles are the real deal. And the best part, you don't need a doctor's recommendation. No Natural gummies are dispensary quality and discreetly delivered right to your door. So whether you're craving a productivity boost, a good night's sleep, or some blissful euphoria, say hello to No Naturals. Try them today with code HUDDLE10 for 10% off your order at shop.nonaturals.com. Know your edibles. Know your experience. No Naturals. So bonus read is done. There we go. Wingman Ted says, you're welcome. Hopefully you've checked them out there. Good products. Tookie G, it is where we are, true, but I contend it's worse for the sport than it was 35 years ago. Who loves their team more today because of the BCS? Anyone? There's more awareness. I think the sport has grown. It was largely regional in a lot of ways 35 years ago. I mean, let me think of what's 35 years ago. I would have been 27, which would have been 98. So I was frustrated that John Cooper couldn't get this team over the hump and that Ohio State probably left a couple of national championships out on the field, and great recruiting didn't necessarily lead to what was going on. I had not left Columbus, Ohio for the first time yet to go to Dallas and then to Nashville before coming back. I think that it's kind of like, I've already talked about South Park, and those of you who know me know that I have an extensive knowledge of South Park, way too much of a knowledge of South Park. And this feels very Memberberry-ish. We all romanticize what it used to be, but can we truly put ourselves back 35 years ago and look at what was going on and say, this was better? Or is it the dog with the fire around him saying, this is fine? I like where college football is a lot more now than where I thought it was in 98. Yes, I started working in sports media in 94. Maybe I was already jaded and whatever, cynical of everything else. But I never really felt that there was an innocence and purity when it came to collegiate athletics. I think a lot more stuff is more prevalent now. I think a lot of the skirting of rules is a lot more out there, but I don't believe for a second there weren't $100 handshakes back in the day. I don't believe for a second that there weren't inducements and things of that nature going on. I mean, 98 is right around the start of the recruiting era for websites, even though Rivals.com, who I used to work for, kind of classifies it as 2002, but I think Rivals 1.0 was around in like 97 or 98 before it got run into the ground and got bought out of mothballs by Shannon Terry's group. I don't know. I'm going to agree to disagree with you. And that's really I wish more people would have been. I wish I'd do a better job of promoting this. I need to get a hype man to promote the shows for me, because I think we've had a really good conversation here. And I think we've really kind of kept on topic 2 or 3 topics here. And I think this will be one that people go back and listen to. Aaron says, this is the worst part of the year for me as a fan because I cannot wait for the season to arrive. Absolutely. Well, you're not going to have to wait much longer for the start of spring practice. Recruiting coverage we're going to get out of the dead period. We're going to have more recruiting coverage coming up. Mark has some trips on the books. I know that I've got a couple camps I'm going to as well. Spring football is coming along. And then before you know it, Southern Swing will be here. And while if you're not necessarily a recruiting fan, Southern Swing may not be the greatest thing for you, there are a lot of people out there that are unaware of what Southern Swing is. we will do a show, down the line where we talk about what Southern Swing is. Let me scroll through these really quickly. I want to be done. Wingman Ted says, certainly remembers what member berries are. David Greenshield says the sport still isn't really that popular on the East Coast. I lived in New Hampshire for 2 years, and I never met a college football fan up there of any significance. I mean, I knew people that, there were people who liked UNH. This was prior to Ryan Day ever setting foot on the UNH campus as a quarterback. But no, it wasn't a big deal over there. Tookie G, yes, and regionalism was better. Nationalizing everything is an overall negative. Therefore, ergo, vis-a-vis, you're a communist. Comrade. No, but seriously, I don't like salary caps. I don't like I think that spirit of the game and all of that are just fancy catchwords for I just don't like what it is now. So I'm going to have fond memories, be them real or massaged through a gentle lens of what things used to be and how stuff was so much better. I can sit there and remember how much easier things were in the early 2000s for me because of this, that, and the other. But then I could also look back and be like, wow, things kind of sucked then too. Just same blank, different day. So I don't know. Let me go through here. Yeah, they're now all Lamborghini handshakes. The market dictates that. The market dictates that. If the market did not dictate it, getting a G-Wagon or a Lambo or whatever, nobody would be getting a Lambo or a G-Wagon. So it is the result of where we are, and it's where, and again, you're not arguing that it has to go back. You recognize the bell has been rung. You cannot unring the bell. But I don't think that this simpler time was any better. I really don't. But that's just me. Last. Troy V. As opposed to the gold Trans Am handshakes in the 1980s. Mic drop. Yes. And if you want more information on that, I highly recommend going and finding the ESPN 30 for 30 Pony Excess to learn more about SMU as it got the death penalty with the recruitment of Eric Dickerson and to a lesser extent Craig James and everything else there. It was by far one of my favorite 30 for 30s that I ever saw. Last one. Of course, there's some things that are better, but it doesn't mean that they're net better. We're going to just have to agree to disagree. We're at over 90 minutes. I am losing my voice. I have not had lunch. I'm starting to get hangry. Not at anybody here, just hangry because I'm ready to eat. So until next time, I want to thank everybody for watching us here on the Big Me Kickoff. Be sure to check out our friends over at nonaturals.com. Subscribe to buckeyehuddle.com. Subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell. Don't miss a single episode. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will talk to you next week, likely from Indianapolis and the NFL Scouting Combine.